The explosion happened in the afternoon on a Friday in the middle of July. The offices of the Labour Party are right around the corner from where the bomb exploded. A lot of our friends were in government. The summer camp is a place where people come together to talk about how we want the world to be. It's a really kind of good system that creates a sense of civic duty, I guess, in people. The island is very small. It takes about 10 minutes to walk around it at like a normal pace. It's a very beautiful and kind of serene place to be.
And then Breivik came across to the island.
Yeah. We started hearing these popping sounds. It sounded like firecrackers or something like that. And we drove out to the lake and had to get on the ferry. And a man in dark clothes came walking across the hill. And some people ran towards him. And he lifted his gun and shot those people straight down. Upon which I turned around with the crowd and ran into the woods.
So you actually saw that shooting, his first
Yeah.
shootings you actually saw happen?
Well, he had shot people already by then, but that was kind of down the hill across from where I was, so I didn't see that, and that's when we thought there were other things going on. And I didn't still comprehend what was happening. I still didn't understand that this was reality in some sort of way, because in my reality, like students on summer vacation in Norway, in a peaceful, serene place in the middle of nowhere, people don't get shot. Like that's not part of that reality in some sort of way. So we ran into the woods, and in the woods, along the track that goes around the island, I found a boy who was 8 years old. His father was among the security guards and among the first people to get shot. But he was he was freaked out to an extent where he felt paralyzed, I think. So I took the boy and carried him into the forests, and we hid together. And I kind of stayed halfway on top of him, holding him down and covering his mouth because he wanted to scream out for his father and wanted to run away, which would have gotten him killed probably. Then at one point we stumbled into a pile of dead bodies of friends who had been executed, who had been hiding underneath some sort of rock formation that kind of covered the track.
And you recognise them as being your friends?
Yeah.
How many?
There were 8 people there. And in that pile was also a phone. And I remember distinctly the ringing of this phone, because that kind of brought the outside world to us somehow. And someone was trying to reach someone who had been killed and who would never be able to pick up and answer ever again. I kind of blacked out from that, but managed to keep track of the boys somehow, and together we ended up on the tip of the island, which is kind of towards the south, but you can see across the lake to land there. And on land we saw the longest line of ambulances and police vehicles you could ever imagine. And in the air above us was a helicopter. And there were boats in the water, and we tried kind of signaling them that we wanted help. And we stayed sitting there for a little while. And then out of the bushes behind us came a man in police uniform. And we had been in touch with the police for a good hour at this point, trying to get them to come there and help us. And this man in a police uniform came out of the woods and said he was from the police and that they had caught the bad guy. And I was on the phone with my father at the time and told him, we're safe now. And then the man lifted his gun and started shooting at the grape. And I jumped in the water and lost the connection with my father, so the last thing he heard was that I'm okay. And I swam straight outwards, with everyone in the group basically jumping in the water. Breivik was shooting at the crowd, and I sank because I was wearing a massive woolen jumper, and I think that probably saved me. And then I managed to pull the sweater off and stood back up in the water and looked towards the island where I saw Breivik take aim at me. And
how far away was he at that time from
it
you?
must have been like 5 meters or something like that. It can't have been far at all. And there's footage of this because the helicopter, it turned out much later, was not a police helicopter but a helicopter from the broadcasting company in Norway. So I stood up in the water and looked back towards land and saw Breivik take aim at me, and it was the weirdest moment of my life because I realized there and then that this was my last moment. I'm going to die now.
But he missed.
He missed. So I fell over in the water thinking I was dead, which also was weird. But yeah, the bullet kind of flew straight past my ear, and I think Breivik thought he had hit me. And so I managed to, with the two young boys, swim around some rocks and hide underneath some bushes that were hanging out of the water. Luckily, Breivik kind of gave up on this location and walked back up onto the island while we were doing that. And there he got caught by the real police.
So you had this sort of existential experience of thinking, I'm going to die.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that. And then you found that you'd survived after all.
Yeah.
So how did you come to terms with that?
Because I was okay with being dead, but I haven't always been okay with being alive as a result of this. Because surviving something like this is really painful in so many ways. I mean, we lost 69 of my friends, which dealing with the trauma of something like this, trying to find my way back to life after accepting that was extremely painful and difficult, and yeah, it's kind of still something I struggle with. I think one of the main driving factors for me working so much against people having to be in that situation, I work every day now to try to end violent extremism and terrorism as a whole.
And you describe yourself as a technologist.
Yeah.
What does that involve? What does that mean?
My starting point for wanting to do that was long before any of this happened. Back when I was pretty young and realized the power of storytelling. It really kind of shapes our minds and how we work and how we behave, what stories we read and are told, and what we learn about good and evil and our place in the world. And one of the means that I loved was film.
And then you got chosen to be one of these 10 youth ambassadors for the Kofi Annan Foundation Extremely Together initiative.
Yeah.
Can you explain about all that and how you were chosen?
Essentially, Kofi Annan asked his staff at one point at the Kofi Annan Foundation, which is what he now runs. He asked his staff what the biggest issue that people are facing these days are, and they put their heads together for a while and came back to him and said violent extremism is a pretty big one. It's a generational issue, is kind of what they pointed out. The people who tend to be targeted by violent extremism are young people to a large extent. If you look to the attack in Norway, definitely. It was a summer camp for youth that was the target of the attack. If you look to events like the attack in Manchester in May, that was an attack on youth and basically what it means to be young. Kofi Annan saw that, and he saw that also young people are the people who are being targeted by recruiters and brought into extremist movements, because youth wants to have that agency to change the world.
So you've touched on this whole issue of the nature of good and evil.
Yeah.
Is it really possible to love Anders Breivik? I mean, was what he was doing evil, or was he evil?
And some people didn't even want to speak his name, and when his picture was on the papers, they turned the papers around, and they kind of stopped seeing him as a human being. And I kind of fell in that trap as well. And one of the names that people started calling Breivik is He Who Shall Not Be Named, and Lord Voldemort is of course called He Who Shall Not Be Named in that. And I think there's an important message in that in itself, because by doing that, by not naming someone's name, you are giving them an extraordinary power in some sort of way. You're saying you are too important or powerful in some sort of way, and Breivik is just a man, the violent extremist, but also as a human being, and someone that we had to deal with as a human being, who became an extremist, not someone who by default was an extremist. But reconciliation for me is about learning to live with the fact that something happened, and kind of building on from there. And that's kind of what I've been trying to do. I've been saying, yes, this thing happened, it was horrible, it was terrible. And what I have to do is to figure out how do I best move on from that. How do I even transform that in some sort of way and use it potentially as a vessel for something good.
Thank you very much. I think you've been on an absolutely heroic journey.
So firstly, thank you to Initiatives of Change for inviting me here today to say a few words, and thank you so much, Bjørn, for such a thought-provoking talk. The core issue when dealing with violent extremism is recognising that we all dehumanise each other.
And you talked about reconciliation earlier, and I thought I'd give you another R word in English, and that is resilient, because you strike me as incredibly resilient, and that is very inspirational, so thank you. I do think we share a common goal to prevent radicalisation and violent extremism. I represent the Norwegian government, and it's a priority for us both at home and overseas. Internationally, we work in fragile states to remove the basis for and the support to violent extremist groups. In areas of Syria and Iraq that have recently been liberated from ISIL, our stabilisation efforts are what we try and do to keep those areas safe and secure. And at home, we continue to build on our national action plan to prevent radicalisation and violent extremism, because it is unacceptable that we see the potential for recruitment to terrorism within our societies. Prevention is key. Last month, the 5th National Congress against radicalisation and violent extremism took place in Oslo. And I think rather fittingly for our conversation this evening, the theme of that conference was dialogue. And I think that really resonates with what you do and is at the heart of your work, Bjørn. Because we need dialogue to prevent radicalisation and violent extremism. We, as a society, must talk to each other, and we must talk to those at risk. Inclusiveness, exchange of ideas, and trust are the antitheses of terror. So thank you for continuing to share your story, for continuing to inspiring us to try and share our common goal. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.